All right. You are a unique individual with the power to change lives just by being who you are, sharing your wisdom, and telling your story. Welcome to Legend in the Making, the podcast that recounts the adventures of experts on their way to becoming industry legends. We are powered by Jen's Pen, dedicated to drawing out the wisdom, knowledge, and stories of professionals and transforming them into authoritative books that teach, inspire, and lead. Our legend today is Melanie Burnicle. Sorry.
I
I've been
love
saying that in my
it.
head all week, and I'm like, don't say it that way.
I quite like it. It means like we probably know each other really well by now, and that's what your friends would call you. So hey, I'm good with that.
Sorry about that. All right, Melanie. Yes, we have met just this past week, but it's been so much fun to know you. So tell us all a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got there.
Likewise.
Thank you. So let us know what you do, and I mean, we had a great conversation the other day, so let's just kind of recap that conversation. Basically, tell me what you do and how you got there.
Right. Well, I do a few things. I'm not one of those people who can just do one thing. It's not really in my wheelhouse. I wouldn't say I get bored very easily. It's more of a fact that I like to experience different parts of myself. So I like to experience that within my work. Other people might go, oh, wow, she's all over the place. But for me, I feel like I get to experience all the different levels of me by working across the creative sector and then also across the business sector and then bringing it all together and entwining it. So I guess the ethos behind what I do is bringing people together, uniting, nurturing, empowering, and then the new business, is educating and elevating. So really it's all the same things with nice words put to it. But yeah, it's something that I've always been able to do is bring people together, and then I always want to see people succeed. And so it's something that I remember when I was starting out in the creative fields. I'm like, oh, I really wish I wasn't so scared of people that were above me and doing better things for me than me at the time. And I wish I wasn't so scared. And I wish there was a place where you could be open up to the conversation of, wow, could you mentor me? Could you help guide me? Or, and things like that. So there were agents and things, but you're paying them to do a job and they do their job and then that's about it. And so I was always looking for these things, and for my search in looking for what I needed, by the time I got there and realized there's still nothing, I was also at a place in my career where I could then turn around and how can I be of service to others? And that really then started me on this journey of education on a bigger scale. So by trade, makeup artist and hairstylist. I did that from the age of 21. I'm now 47. Sometimes I still jump on the tools, which is, really nice. And it's playful. And then moving from that, I started my own production company because people were saying to me, oh, can you just pull everything together? You know everyone, you do everything. I'm like, well, hang on a second. Why am I getting paid for this? Like, that's no fun. So, I enjoyed the organization part of it, which is the business mind. So yeah, balancing that kind of left brain, right brain, however you like to put it. For me, it's like balancing different parts of my soul. And then doing that, then led me to creating the Makeup Artist Guild, and then the affiliate awards platform, again bringing people together, giving them the business knowledge to then help them have a successful, sustainable career, and then elevating them and their work through the actual awards program. And then we've grown that to now encompass the Beauty Boss Awards, which helps all the other people behind the scenes in the industry. Because I was like, well, are these people being acknowledged that I'm talking to? So then, let's incorporate that. So again, it's that bringing together, and there's something beautiful when I think you see people and they feel like there's been like a segregation in parts of the industry. Oh, you work over here and you work over here, and well, you're my competition. But no one's actually competition. You all
Right.
bring something very different to the table, whether it's your energy, your craft, the way you do something. And then when you bring together people for an awards, you really do see the value in what everybody brings to the table in its own unique, diverse way. And then those barriers break down and the conversations begin, and then the evolution of the creativity, because the people start working cohesively, grows. And that, to me, I'm like I don't need like a pat on the back. When you work for yourself, you get used to not getting one of those. You know.
You get uncomfortable when people do say something nice about you. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah, you're like, hang on, are you talking to me? And you're like, but you get to a point where you're like, thank you. Thank
Yes.
you. I
Yes.
appreciate that. And that takes time because you don't have a team of cheerleaders on the same journey when you're an entrepreneur or working within your own space all the time. But when you see that what you're doing and the people that you get to bring together create their own magic, that's where the real magic happens. Like, you're creating a space or an environment where people feel safe and open to that experience, and like to be able to facilitate that in a small way. Everyone else does their part. My part's extremely small on that level. So you allow people to then feel and see that there's a real magic in the creativity and the bringing of people together when those barriers get broken down.
That's, I mean, I couldn't agree more. When you have several creative people all together in one room, collaboration is, I mean, one of
Yeah.
the things you said that I mean, there's so many things that I want to go back and talk about. But one of the things I think that you said that I think is really important is like there is no competition.
Yeah.
Because people are who they are, and people are going to be attracted to you because you're you, or them because they're them. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because I think that's a
Yeah.
big block for people.
Yeah. And it's something that I personally struggled with for a really long time. I used to look at people and go, wow, you're so much better than me. And, rather than, wow, what can I learn here? And
Yeah.
oh, how can I potentially bring that set of skills into what I do, but then remain unique? And I think, especially when you're young, like I just wanted to like be a part of something. And I just was craving this, belonging to something. And that started off, extremely badly. When I was 16, I was belonging to a very bad crowd of
I
people.
think a lot of us
Um,
had that bad experience.
but I had to, because I was conforming to ideals of me that were society based and what I thought was expected of me. And also the opportunities, being the age that I am, of what were presented to me by people that had like importance in my life. And then I was like, this doesn't sit well with me. And then, thinking, okay, I've got to conform and go and get an office job. So I did that to, fit the mold. And I was so goddamn miserable. And on top of that, like didn't feel like I belonged there. Like I felt like I belonged with the creatives and the magic, that was internally and truthfully me. But then I was like, oh, do this. And like I was so wanting to belong to something that I hung out with some really, really bad people. And yeah, I'm very grateful that I think I've got little happy spirit guides and angels. And I just remember being held in front of the mirror one day and this voice saying to me, if you go down this path, you die. And it was and the people I was hanging out were not good people at all. And so I just, from that day forward, I just never spoke to them again. And like, you could, people like screaming at you as you're walking down the street. I was 16. I was so young. But, that's just who I am. Like, no, it was like literally someone just went, no, that's your yellow brick road. Off you go. Goodbye. And I was like, oh, okay. off,
Thank you.
off I went down another. Yeah. And I'll be forever grateful for that, because but I didn't trust that as my inner guide either.
Right.
But there's this sense of belonging, I think, for everybody in the world, whether you are belonging, have this longing to be a part of a relationship dynamic or a family dynamic or a work community or whatever that might be. I think it's really it's in our core to belong. And I think one thing that people don't understand, especially when you're young and you're trying to find yourself, and regardless at 16, you do it the right way, the wrong way, you get there in the end.
Mhm.
For most people, I find. But there's this real understanding through the pains and the traumas that you experience that you actually already belong. Like, you belong to yourself, like first and foremost. And there's a real peace in knowing that. And in the last year, I've experienced that even more. Like, I've been in hospital more than I haven't been, it feels like, or recovering from surgery. 5 surgeries in a year, throw in a pulmonary embolism just for good measure, and, a few other things going on. But again, like, rather than, everything was making me, for me, a social butterfly, extremely isolated.
Mhm.
And this was a lesson that I needed to learn. And this was happening from COVID. I was stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment pretty much on my own a lot of the time. And then again, coming out of that, starting to get the wings, I'm ready to fly, building my business in the States. Let's go. Let's move this forward. I'm ready. And then all of a sudden I had 18 months, like 12 months of health issues that have, kept me very, very still, but again, in my own space. And again, so rather than me having to look out here for this sense of who am I, why things aren't working, it's like you come back. And again, like, it's deepened my practice with this and the sense of belonging. It's mine. And then I can choose to share that with people and bring people in, but you never not belong. And I really wish this is what they taught me at school, because I never felt I belonged, or I felt like I was an outsider, or the way my brain works. So many people go, oh, like, that's just too hard for me to comprehend, because it's like, and it's all these ideas all the time. And I didn't realize that other people don't experience the world like I do until, I sort of became a lot more aware and conscious. And I was like, huh. And someone said to me, how many ideas do you have? I'm like, oh, so many. They're like, you do realize that they're precious. And I was like, well, no, I get them all the time. So, what idea do you want? Like, I could give you an idea right now if you gave me, something that you were working on. I'm like, oh, have you tried this? And they just come to me. And I just thought that everybody experienced the world like this.
Yeah.
And so then you start to find gratitude because they're a gift that's given to me. And, through that level of consciousness, this can, flow through and I can share with other people. So yeah, I think there's that. Going back to sort of what you're asking, about what was the main question? It was like kind of
Competition. Like,
the competition.
like there's
So I
five
think,
things I want to talk about that you just said, but go ahead. Competition.
yeah, with this competition, like I was a very competitive person, and not with other people, but with myself, which
Right.
meant to a lot of harsh criticism of myself, a lot of, to a point that it was unhealthy. This
Yeah.
level of perfectionism that I was trying to create to feel like I belonged, or, I was the best at something so that I could actually be something in this world, and not having that understanding that I already am, which has only
Yeah.
come to me in the last, handful of years. And there's such a peace and such a joy that comes with that. And then you're looking at life very differently. But then if you had this knowledge prior, when you're looking at other people and what they do, you're not my competition.
Yeah.
You are if I choose you to be, but what if I don't? And what if I see the beauty in what you do and what you bring to the table? And can I learn from that? And maybe
Right.
it's something I don't want to learn from, but maybe I can sit back and appreciate it and be aware of what you bring to the table. And then there's an opening, when you realize that I've elevated this other person in my head to be so far here and so far out of reach of me. But why? And the more people sat in my makeup chair, the more I realized, as a makeup artist, you're working very closely with people, and you're working with a diverse range of people, high profile singers, people who have just finished a film, they're doing a film premiere, you're doing a press junket. You're working with all these different people, and you say, oh my God, this person's in a movie, they must be this. They are regular, real people at their core. And some people might have a persona that they bring to the table to keep their real personality theirs. But ultimately, at the core, we're all the same. You're no better than me if you have $3 million and I have $0. You're no better than me. Like, you might have more financial wealth than me, but we're equals, on so many levels. Like, we can be everyone and everything and feel and have compassion and kindness regardless of status, or society's version of status. And I think there's breaking that down and being able to meet people on an energy level or a spirit level or a soul level, however you like to put it. There's something really beautiful in that. And when people feel seen for what they bring to the table, and you can see through the exterior and you acknowledge that in someone, I very rarely find that it doesn't come back to you with a nice energy. And so then when you're meeting people on this level, there's an opening to be able to have a conversation about creativity or life and experience in a very different way than being in the physical form. And it's all like, oh, what do you look like? Oh, is this pretty enough? And working in an industry where people are judged sometimes on their looks, being able to see past that and showing people, whether it's a young model and they're getting booked for their looks, but showing them that you see, their true value and worth behind all of this whilst they're sitting in the chair, gives them great comfort with you, and they relax. And it doesn't matter. I've worked with the VP of, Amazon. Like, I've worked with VPs of so many people from around the world, on so many different levels. And I remember when I was young, I was nervous, but I wasn't nervous about them. I was nervous about me not being enough, me not being good enough. Or what if I make a mistake? What if you make a mistake? It's mascara. Wipe it off. I'm not doing surgery on somebody. Like, my job is not that, dire to someone's, live or die moment, So
Yeah.
make a mistake. And when you're comfortable in your own skin, you can fix it really easily. But when you're not, that negative energy you're putting into them, they're already fearful. They've got to present in front of 5,000 people on a stage. And then there's this of like, whoa, and it's just like end up being an explosion of energy, and most often not in a great way.
Not in a good
But if
way.
you can, yeah, but when you bring a different energy to the table, the space that you can create for people. And it doesn't mean that, when you're working on a job and there's a hierarchy and you have to follow a team leader or things like that, doesn't mean go and knock them out of the way by any means. You accept, your position, and you choose to work collaboratively with people. But also, still, we're all human at the end of the day, and we're all behind that. We're a being. So can we meet
Yes.
people on that level, so that they're not competition, and we can learn and grow and evolve, rather than, if you put that barrier up, you stay the same. But
Yeah.
life always asks you to keep changing and keep evolving and keep growing. So whether you like it or not, you can stay stuck and feel that feeling. When you feel like your feet are stuck to the ground and you're like trying to run and you're like,
But you
it's
can't
not
keep.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how life starts to feel when you put these barriers up. But quite often we put these barriers up to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need to do that. But then when can we break those down? And sometimes bringing people into a room and celebrating one another really quite often allows that moment of, wow, you're brilliant. And I really respect that. And, wonder what I could do. If this person's doing this, like, there's possibility here for me. And I remember someone saying to me once, like, oh, it's impossible, I can't do this. And I just turned around. Someone, I was teaching like a 4 hour like little workshop, and they messaged me the other day, like out of the blue. From this was years ago. I did this workshop with them. It was 2020, and she said, "I'll never forget you breaking down impossible into I'm possible." And it was something that I read in a book. I didn't make it up, but it stuck with me. And every time I know it's impossible, I'm like, no, it's not. Yeah,
I'm
I'm
awesome.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then so there's this. I don't think anything that I do is really reinventing the wheel, so to speak, but it's very much sharing wisdom that's been given to me, or I've read, or it comes to you when you're ready, and you accept it when you're ready, and you receive it when you're ready. And then once you have this information, you can't not share it. Like, I and people quite often are tight-lipped. Oh, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to say this, and oh, someone might steal my idea. Well, it's happened to me so many times. It's like I'm very mindful with projects that we're working on to work within our space until the project's ready for launch. But at the same time, if I've got knowledge that can help you, I need to share that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You just said so many things that I want to talk about. I think one of the things that you kind of covered there that I think is important for entrepreneurs to be aware of is, um, first off, you can't just look at yourself as the one thing. It's going to be a holistic view of yourself and your life. But that you can't ignore the spiritual, and
Yeah,
you really can't. And being comfortable in your own skin, being comfortable with
yeah,
who you are is what's going to affect everything, whether like the competition thing, but your ability to relate to other people, be in the room
yeah,
with someone and not be thinking, oh my God, what are they thinking of me? And like being so nervous about like making a mistake or anything like that. Like your example with like the mascara, like just wipe the mascara off. What's the problem? But I know thinking about that as like my younger self, how I would have reacted. I would have been like, oh, like it would have freaked me. Like, but so it really just kind of hit home what you were just saying. But I think it's important for people, especially people starting out who don't who maybe are younger or who haven't had the experience that to get them to that certain place to become more comfortable with themselves is
Yeah.
really key.
Yeah. And I think I used to think when I went through like anxiety and depression in my sort of late teens, early 20s, I really thought at the time that I was a failure because I just thought that that was something bad. I remember my dad said to me, I said, I'm going to a therapist. And he's like, oh, what are they going to do? Lock you up in a padded cell? And I'll still never forget those words. And I was like, oh, crap. I didn't think about this. But it really wasn't. But it was just, again, someone else's, the way that they understood what that help looked like, because
Yeah.
that's probably what it was when my dad was younger. And it's not something that people of their generation naturally put their hand up. But I thought, I have all this emotion. It's really overwhelming me. I used to have panic attacks so bad that I would lay on the floor and it felt like the house was collapsing on me. And I felt like I was suffocating. It was just the most horrific experience. And like, it was so the amount of times I used to always think like as well. So if it came on and I was in a shopping center, my vision from eyesight up, if I tilted my head up, would black out. So I
Mm.
could see from here down, but as soon as I'd move my head, I'd lose my vision. And the amount of times I went to hospital, like, oh, and they're like, you're having a panic attack. But no one explained to me what a panic attack was. Nobody
Yeah.
helped me. Um, and then, and I think this is where, you start to look at yourself. And I remember I got through the anxiety. I don't know how I managed it, but I did without getting help from a doctor. And I just figured things out. And I read something and I kept like a little crystal like in my bra near my heart. And every time I'd have this panic attack, I'd just put my hand on my heart. I'm like, okay, doesn't kill me. It doesn't kill me. Like it doesn't kill me. And I think the not being able to breathe for me was something that had happened when I was a kid as well, but that was having severe asthma attacks. So I associated the panic attacks with that suffocation of like, the amount of times like, you get to hospital, you're on a machine for days, and then, you're on prednisone, like, steroids to keep your lungs open. And so there was a real genuine fear of this not being able to breathe. But then I managed to get through the panic attacks. And then after that, when I first went through depression, like it was bad. Like I couldn't move out of the house. I was terrified to move out of the house. I know, like I did think, like, how do I just end this? Because there's times in your life when they get so dark that you cannot see the light. And I read something recently. I'm like, oh God, I wish my little kid self knew this. And it's like, sometimes I don't know I can't think of the proper wording, but sometimes it went something along the lines of, when you can't see the light, maybe you are the light.
I like
And
that.
so I know I read it and I was like, oh, that would have been useful.
That would have been
But
very useful.
but would I have been ready to receive that back then?
That's the
Probably not.
question, right? Right.
Yeah, and that's okay. So there's this evolution. And so when you look back at these moments, like it took me a long time to feel okay about going into therapy and talk. And really, the first time I talked publicly was at an event in America in 2022 at an artist convention. And I was talking on a panel, and a lot of people's fears were coming up. And they said, oh, you're such a confident talker. I said, well, look, I've always been able to talk, but there was moments in my life where I was suffocating and I felt like I was paralyzed, and that was everywhere. It was,
Yeah.
and so I know what that feels like. I said, but generally, looking back now, so many years later, what was it asking of me?
Mm.
Because I was looking for all this recognition out here to make me feel important and who I was. And it was just like stopping you. And what I realized now, like I was always trying to be a step ahead. I was always trying to race. I was always trying to, even when I danced, when I was younger and we did shows and whatnot, and they were always like, you're always ahead of the beat. And I was so frightened of being here. I was running ahead. So I was always in this future and never really, like feeling satisfied because you're racing against time. But what really is time? If you take like there's so many different things. And I felt like I was always trying so hard to be enough that I was missing everything because I was trying to always be that step ahead. So then I didn't get caught and I didn't have to feel this, or what if I protect myself and then all of a sudden it was like with emotion. It's like, oh, okay, I have to sit with this. And then these things have happened over and over in my life. So after going through depression, 3.5 years with a psychiatrist, I'm like, yes, I've got this. My career's taking off. My life's taking off. I've now met somebody who, I fell in love with, who I ended up marrying. He actually saw me for me and was accepting, which I was like, wow, this is great. So then I was defined by a relationship. I was defined by, I'm a makeup artist and I'm working with all these people. So that makes me important. Within the space of 4 months after finishing therapy and meeting, somebody that I fell in love with, I had this severe car crash. Again, stopped me dead set still because I was identifying as to what made me important. Oh, I'm a makeup artist. I am this. I'm a partner. Again, stripped me right back to being bare. And who am I if I can't be a makeup artist? Who am I if I'm not a partner? Who am I without all of this identification in what I think is making me important? And look, I didn't like the world. I didn't like people for a long time after my car crash. I was a miserable, let's just go bleep, bleep, bleep. I was not a person because I felt like I've done all this work. I finally achieved it. Like, look at me go. And then they went, bang, thanks for coming. Like, let's just, and so again, in the moment, did I love that happening? No, I was like, why am I being tortured in this life? Now, that was back in 2002, the car crash. And then there's been a multitude of things, whether it was being close to bankruptcy in 2018, whether it was whatever it was, like there's been so many things. But when things happen, even like in 2018, I didn't lose sight of myself because I'd learned to look back at these pain moments, traumas, whatever you want to call it. And I saw the gifts that I was given in those moments, and that self-growth and that self-mastery, so to speak, and understanding. And so everything that's happened, and it's not the good things that, have been able to push me into understanding myself so much, because when things are great, you're like, you're like dancing around and it's just this sense of freedom. But now I think I can come to this sense of freedom from a place that has the physical experience of the pain and the trauma, but then the evolution of self, because this is stable, like the core of me and my core, what happens in here, this can't be affected by the physical world, and my spiritual connection and my meditation practice really like keeps me centered. And people used to always talk about this centering thing, and I think I had glimpses of what it meant until I really understood it on a much deeper level from 2020 onwards. And then last year through, again, I've always experienced these growth moments through physical pain. So I've dealt with chronic pain with my car crash, and then I was given, a lovely disease called adenomyosis, which 1 in 5 women actually have, but they don't know they've got it. They just think it's a bad period. And then, and then I had a pulmonary embolism, which feels like you've got a house on your chest. I didn't know what it was when they told me. I was like, yeah, well, when the doctor said, I was like, sorry, buddy, like I've watched Grey's Anatomy, but I was checking out the hot doctors, given these terms. Like, you've got a blood clot in your lung. It's like, oh, right. I guess that's serious. Like, yeah, you won't be leaving hospital for a while. I'm like, okay, cool. So I treated that whole, rather than having fear in that moment, I was like, can I stay in this centered place? I had 9 different surgeons because I've now got a heart monitor in my chest that stays there for a few years. I had a pulmonary embolism. I was having vestibular migraines, which I'd adapted to. I didn't realize. They're like, how long have you had this pixelated vision? I'm like, oh, since 2018. Anyway, the neurosurgeon, when I told her that, I thought it was the angels coming to visit me, thought I was an absolute nut job. I'm sure she was about to send me for another brain MRI. But all these things, and people were coming into the room, and the staff in the hospital were like, you're so friendly. I'm like, I've got people cooking me like meals every day. I've got 3 meals a day. People are looking after me. I'm like, I'm just treating this like a little mini vacation. They're like, yeah, okay. But finding that, and it hasn't been easy in the last year, and there's been moments where I actually thought, could I just check out? Like, I don't want to be in this much pain anymore. Can I just leave this earth? And I did think about it, like, what are we in now? April. So it wasn't January this year. It was January 23. The pain got so bad between my chronic pain, the adenomyosis pain. Little did I know I had a chronic inflammation in my gallbladder that was taken out 2 months ago. They're like, this has been going on for years. I told people I was getting pains in my chest, but no one was listening until I had the embolism. But so when you've had all this pain, and it just January, I rang a lovely guy called Bassam who taught me breath work and meditation during COVID on a new level for me. And I sent him a message, and I literally said, if I die, can I just go into one of these peaceful meditations, because it's the only place I'm finding peace. And when I have to pull myself out of this deep meditation and be back in the physical body, I'm not coping. And I literally just want to die. And the thought over a 3-week process of wanting to die became so present. It was the only thing. And I'm like, if I hadn't been through all the things I'd been through, I probably could have done something. But I actually went, hang on a second, I need help here. And I reached out to a person who I thought wasn't going to panic, because I couldn't add that stress into what I was already enduring. And he said, I'll be there in 3 hours. And he was, and he sat with me. We did a breathwork meditation, and his words were, if that was the case, don't you think we already would have done it already? like we're here to experience this, our soul, in a physical experience. So I was like, like, that's really that simple. So if I'm the energy and the soul behind all of this, can I allow this to play out, experience the pain, feel it, but not be the pain?
Right.
And that's been, a dance. It's a dance, because society gets you to pull yourself out here. You're on your phone, you're doing this, you're working, you're trying to generate. But can you do that from here and then present out here?
Right.
And so I feel like in the last 4 years, I've been in this like cocoon again, like what I was after my car crash, like what I was when I was going through depression. But maybe moving forward, I understand when I need to be in that cocoon, to like plant the seed and allow the new part of me to flourish on a different level. Can I possibly do this without pain? Because am I aware enough to not have to have the pain be the catalyst for change? We'll see what comes. I don't know. But I'm open to the experience.
Right. That's such an interesting thing to kind of look at life and be able to recognize that, okay, life is about the evolution of your soul, and apparently your soul needs to go through a lot of physical pain to learn its lesson.
Well, I think it's been the catalyst to slow me down, because I was always trying to go. I was like, like those wild brumbies, and I was trying to ride the horse, but I was being dragged behind because I was always racing. But what if you can find like that centeredness, and then you can just be on top of the horse and they can still be flying, but you're not being dragged behind, and all of that. Yeah. So I think it was what pushed me to ask those deeper questions of who am I? And it's been that constant. So I'm just wondering, like, now that I have a much deeper understanding of it, maybe I don't need to endure so much pain when the lessons come into the future. Or maybe I do. But it'll be what it'll be.
Exactly. I think that any sort of introspection and learning about yourself more or less comes with some amount of pain. Like you can't,
Uh,
like you,
Physical, financial, emotional.
whatever the case may be. Like it all
Yeah,
ends up being emotional and spiritual, even if it's physical or financial or whatever. If that's the source of it, it all ends up being emotional and spiritual. And um,
yeah.
I think again, like if we're going to be talking about all of life, the holistic part, which is business and, you know, personal and
Mhm.
spiritual and physical and all the stuff, like being able to come back to that grounded place that you're talking about is so key because, like you said, the world brings us out of it.
Yeah,
You've got your tablet and you've got your phone, you've got your computer, you've got your TV, you've got everything, and they are purposely distracting you from
yeah,
being who you are, which is this being who's experiencing these things
yeah,
rather than thinking that you are these things.
yeah. And also, I think when you start to succeed, and I've personally done this as well, when you start to succeed, you're like, I am this, I am that, or
That's
I now have like this car. Oh, that makes me this. But what about no? Like, I appreciate that the work I'm doing has allowed me to have nice things, but those nice things don't define who I am because things can come and go
right.
and money can come and go. Like, what is wealth? And because I've never, I like to have money, and I've been plenty of times where I've been without,
Mhm.
especially when you're sick and you're not making money when you work for yourself. Like it's really confronting. Um, but there's something when you attach your identity to a dollar value, that's and when you're working for yourself, you have to a point, because you're like, I'm worth this much and you need to pay me this much to do a job. But again, I'm not the job, I am not the money, but this facilitates how I get to live my life, in a
Right.
sense of, it doesn't determine who I am, but it can facilitate an ease of life. So there's a way of sort of bringing that in and asking for it in a way that sits better with me. And I think a lot of creators that I speak to, they're not necessarily driven by money,
Right.
and so how you determine your wealth. And so if I'm ever choosing to do something where it's not a dollar related, exchange for the services that I bring, then what wealth am I gaining? And then, so I always think of things in time, energy, and wealth. What am I prepared to give? How do I do this? And the first time I ever heard that, it was time, energy, and money. And I can't remember where I heard it. And I just sort of went, I don't like that. And I just remember walking with it for a few days. And I do a lot of my processing. Well, sometimes I purposely don't think when I go for my walks, and I allow stuff to come, and there's magic in that. And it was the time, energy, money, and it just kept popping into my head. I'm like, ugh, ugh, ugh. And then I was like, time, energy, wealth, because wealth can be financial, wealth
Mhm.
can be knowledge, wealth can be, you know, an energy exchange. Like, what is that? How does that sit for me? So when I sort of talk to people now, it's like time, energy, and wealth. If you are choosing to share your time with someone, is there a right energetic exchange? Or can you bring knowledge, and can they receive knowledge, or are you gaining knowledge? Like, what is that for you? So there's always that piece of bringing wealth in, but what does that look like? And I think when you work for yourself, you have to be able to charge what you need to be able to charge in order for you to do what you do, but you are not the money. And just
No.
because you have success, which I've won awards, I've done this, and then bang, you're nearly going through bankruptcy because someone stole your idea, and you're like, oh wow. But in that moment with the bankruptcy, like I didn't have to declare, because I moved out of my really nice apartment in my early 40s. One of my friends, we had a birthday, and it was a fancy dress. So I'd gone, and she's like, I've never seen you be this quiet ever. What's going on? I'm like, oh, I didn't even know how to put in words. Like, I'm about to lose everything. All my, like, if you lose one business, they cut you out. You can't run your own businesses. I would have lost all of my businesses, everything. And I was like, I just don't know how to survive. And she's like, she's like, I'm coming back to your place. Come on. Like, we left the party, went back to my place, and we just talked for hours and hours. And I explained everything. She rang me within a week. She's like, right, I've discussed it with my partner. You're moving in with us. I was in my early 40s. Like, I haven't lived with people for a really long time, outside of, a relationship dynamic. And then it ended up being this amazing, fantastic, I was so grateful. And that allowed me to get back on my feet, run our first awards program. So someone had copied like our awards program, and someone had copied this big festival that I'd created for the beauty industry. And they pushed their event out before me and copied all of the things that we had in our, it was just like, wow, at least I know I've got great ideas if people are copying me on that level. But, it took its toll financially, but it didn't change the purpose behind what I was doing, because that just didn't serve me. It was in service of the greater good to help other people succeed. So I think when you can put your ego aside, and I'm not talking about like macho ego, like we all have this, ego, it's part of being human. But can we see it and go, right, the days that you don't want to get out of bed, like, because there's days that you certainly don't sometimes, like, can I get up? I don't want to. I want to be invisible. I'm embarrassed. Like, I've moved out of my nice apartment. I'm living with friends. I'm in my 40s. Like, I've got no money. How am I going to pull this thing off? And I was like, well, hang on a second. You know how to pull it all back together. Like, you know how to pull the pieces together. You've done this before. What have you done that's worked? Rightio. Okay, let's do this. Let's do that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, I didn't lose me in all of it, which when I was younger, you're going through depression, you had to lose yourself to find yourself, and then going through the car crash again, you had to break and then piece that part of you back together in a different way. And this, I was a kind of like I'd broken down a few times, in the sense of either physically, emotionally, whatever, and being able to see how that changes when you pull it back together. And this I didn't have to, be hysterical on the floor, breaking. I was like, that's the financial. I've got these skills. And then you can move forward from this place. And so when you start to notice all those things that have happened, the magic behind what you can then do to move forward, like you see things differently. And I think a lot of people go into business thinking that it's like Instagram. Look at me. All of a sudden I'm famous. And look, you might be that one in a million. That bang, you get that instantaneous following, you've got instantaneous dollars coming through, and that's great. And I take my hat off to anyone who's had that great success, because they've obviously put themselves in a place spiritually and emotionally where they don't feel any blocks and they don't have to do that work along the way. But for most of us, what we end up being able to create and bring to our business and to the work that we do comes from those moments of either having to understand scarcity or having to understand that sense of belonging, or and then we create from building that and creating those environments, and not just for ourselves but for other people. And so when your purpose isn't just, it's not to say you don't have on your thing, I want an abundance of wealth, or I want an abundance of this, and it's not to say don't do that, but it's like when your purpose is very much to in part be of service. Like, yes, you need to really look after yourself first and foremost, because if this isn't looked after, you can't give and share on that level that you'd like to without hurting yourself in the process. But then the work that I do, it's like, how is that in service of other people? How does that help them elevate to that next level? And so when you know that that's your purpose, the days you don't want to get up for yourself, and you have those in life.
Yeah.
So how does this help the people that I'm actually trying to achieve right now? What I'm actually trying to achieve, the bigger goal. And then you're like, oh, well, okay. And so for the moments where you can't get up for you, have that purpose of it being bigger than you, like, what can I bring? And that can just some days just being kind, and being kind to yourself means that you're being kind to others.
Yeah.
And it can be simple as that on the days that are hard. Today, I'm just going to choose to be kind. And if I need to sleep for a couple of hours in the day because I'm recovering from illness, great, I'll sleep. And when I feel like I can work for an hour, I'll work for an hour. And just knowing when to do that, and then when to, there's some times where you're all systems go. And then there's other times where you're really, okay, no, I need to sit still and recognize that and be okay with that.
I think that's a really really good point. And as much as I want to keep talking, there is like another thing that we have to get to. But I think that's a good point to end on too, though, is like to be sometimes it's okay just to do what you can do, be kind to yourself as well as, don't put pressure on yourself to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, it
It's
doesn't.
a lot. There's a
I
lot.
tried.
I know, right? It doesn't work. Doesn't work. But let's just say for now, because we're gonna have to have you back because there's too much to talk about. Thank you very much, Melanie, for
Oh,
sharing
thanks for having me.
your insights and experience are so invaluable. So thank you for sharing them. And thanks everybody out there for joining us on this epic episode of Legend in the Making, are powered by Jen's Pen, where every voice holds a story and every journey is filled with lessons. As a legend in the making yourself, it is your duty to share your voice and lessons for the benefit of others. Go to jenspenbooks.com to find out how I can help you do that. And until the next time, please remember that everybody has a tale to tell. So what's yours?